We turn to our next scripture reading coming from the book of Genesis, chapter 29, verses 15 through 28. Laban said to Jacob, "Just because you're a kinsman, should you serve me for nothing? Tell me what your wages shall be." Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the older one was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes. Rachel was shapely and beautiful. Jacob loved Rachel, so he answered, "I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel." Laban said, "Better that I give her to you than that I should give her to an outsider. Stay with me." So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Give me my wife, for my time is fulfilled, that I may cohabit with her." Laban gathered all the people in the place and made a feast. When evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and he cohabited with her. Laban had given his maidservant Zilpah to his daughter Leah as her maid. When morning came, there was Leah. So he said to Laban, "What is this you've done to me? I was in your service for Rachel. Why did you deceive me?" And Laban said, "It is not the practice in our place to marry off the younger before the older. Wait until the bridal week of this one is over, and we will give you that one too, provided you serve me another 7 years." Jacob did so. He waited out the bridal week of the one when he gave him his daughter Rachel as wife. The grass withers and the flower fades, but the word of the Lord lives forever. And this is the word of the Lord. All thanks be to God. Have you ever had something you did come back to haunt you? One common to a lot of us as maybe being a real knucklehead when we were younger, having our parents be like, "I can't wait till you have kids. I hope they're just like you." Then finally that day comes and their wish comes true. Your kid is all that and more of whatever you used to be growing up. And now all of a sudden you're the one worrying about what they're doing, the choices they're making. That smart mouth that just won't quit. And how in the world are you ever going to get them where they need to go? I don't know. There's just something very familiar about that old song. And it is a very, very old song. You get what you give. You receive back what you put in. You reap what you sow. Now, like in Hinduism, I think this observation about life developed into the idea of karma, which goes a lot further than we're talking about. And you know that if you're good, you move on to something better in the next life. And if you're bad, you become something worse, like a cockroach or something. And now, I'm far from an expert on that. You should talk to a Hindu if you want a better understanding of karma. But what I'm getting at does not go so far as that. Just that the negative things that we do tend to come back and haunt us. Or maybe, to broaden that a little bit, a certain worldview that we've held will be turned on its head as we have to face the reality of some life experience. And of course, the thing that we really hope for, that good things come back around and reward us in the end. None of these scenarios always happen. In general, just to steal a quote from a silly movie, the universe has a way of working itself out. Or maybe it's more like God having a way of bringing things back around for us to learn and grow to a deeper level of maturity. Now that certainly seems to be the case with Jacob this morning. Now we've been following his story for a couple weeks, and his feud with his brother Esau, his struggle to come out on top in this relationship, and having to flee for his life due to the troubles that he caused his brother. The final straw being the blessing that Jacob stole from Esau. Jacob pretended to be Esau when Isaac couldn't see well enough to tell who was who. Isaac was deceived to find out that he gave Jacob the blessing by accident. Esau wanted to kill him, so Jacob left to go find a wife, and stopping along the way for a rest, having an experience with God that we talked about last week, that stairway to heaven, that dream that he had. And God letting him know that there was a much greater nature to what he was a part of. So here we are. Jacob has reached his destination, and he's searching for his wife. Lo and behold, Rachel. Love at first sight. Jacob fell completely for Rachel and wanted her to be his wife. He and her father Laban worked out a deal that Jacob would serve the 7 years and then get to marry her. Those years just flew by as Jacob's eyes were on his bride-to-be. But Rachel had a sister, Leah, and as the scripture describes, Leah wasn't as beautiful as Rachel. And Laban, I think, had some concern about finding her a husband too. So, and really the explanation he gives was that in our culture, we don't marry off the younger daughter first. It's the older daughter. And you kind of get the idea that he was worried about finding Leah a husband. So he tricked Jacob. Much like how Jacob deceived Isaac to get Esau's blessing. Laban deceived Jacob to get him to marry his other daughter as well. Laban sent Leah into Jacob's marriage bed that night, and Jacob didn't realize it until morning. Sure enough, his earlier actions came right back around to haunt him. Of course he was upset, but Laban carried on with his plan. He did give Rachel to Jacob in marriage as well, but had him, wait out that marriage week and then made him promise to work another 7 years. On one hand, I think it's safe to say that Jacob learned his lesson, how it feels to be deceived like that, especially in such a big life-altering way. Now, on the other hand, how the story plays out, I find as really the bigger God thing going on here. Jacob is led right into his role as being the father of the faith. Through all this messy relationship stuff, and things coming back around to haunt him, he ends up becoming this father of the faith through that. Through Leah, he winds up having most of his children. Then through Rachel, his youngest two are born, and having children with their servants also along the way. And it seems like in between Leah and Rachel especially, the universe kind of playing itself out to make up for Leah being the one that's not chosen, the one who's kind of hurt in this relationship. And Rachel having to suffer because she really was barren for a long time before she could have children, and she struggled a lot with that. Rachel, Jacob's true love, finally able to have her own children. That kind of worked out for him, but she struggled a lot on the way. And these other children with Zilpah and Bilhah, all together, the boys of these children, they end up being the 12 fathers and namesakes of the 12 tribes of Israel. So through this messy ordeal, the 12 tribes of Israel are beginning. Ultimately, because of Jacob being tricked into being with Leah along with Rachel, the people of Israel began being shaped into what they would eventually become. God was at work underneath all this messy human stuff. There are, of course, in thinking about this marriage, some additional issues that come to mind, and things that we should probably address a little bit, because for most of us, I bet they're in the back of our minds, and it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of weird. The big difference in time and place can be troubling for us. Marriage was much more of a deal, a business deal between two men, than it was like a man and woman falling in love. And there was polygamy. It wasn't abnormal for a man to have more than one wife. Beyond that, marrying two sisters was unacceptable even in the Jewish law. Just the Jewish law hadn't been established yet at that time. This man with two wives who were sisters were also his relatives, so we find that being kind of weird. The really striking thing is that he loves one so much more than the other, creating a terrible situation for Leah. You know, this story isn't some kind of example for us about what marriage should be. It doesn't paint Jacob or Laban as an irreproachable saint. But we do see that God is busy behind the scenes and the universe kind of working itself out. So let's step back from all that messy stuff that we get a little uncomfortable with and think about God being busy behind the scenes. You know, of course, the bad things we do tend to come back around and haunt us. Not always, but often. Beyond that, I can't help but to think of situations that are a little harder to paint as bad or good or this or that. I can't help but to think of, the guy who was raised believing firmly against homosexuality and then ends up having a child who's gay, resulting in him having to face his own beliefs and reconsidering how to interact with a gay person that shows real unconditional love. Or like the woman who tries to be helpful in convincing an elderly person to give up driving and living on their own at a certain age, later finding herself having to confront her own tough realities of what it'll be like to give up driving and living on your own. Realities that we end up facing that turn our worldviews upside down and truly expand our horizons. It happens, and perhaps we'd be better off in the first place really trying to give deeper thought to how it might be walking in another person's shoes. All in all, the form of this whole idea that we really want in our own lives, the one that we're kind of grasping for, is being rewarded for the good things that we do. And often we are, but not always. Wisdom literature in the Bible really deals with this. Job was righteous, and then he had to experience the worst of the worst. Ecclesiastes makes it particularly clear that there are plenty of times that the good go unrewarded and the bad go unpunished. Nothing is guaranteed in this world. But we also know that in the bigger picture with the Lord, there are very, very real guarantees. There are God's promises, and that God does work things out. If it doesn't happen in this life, then it's going to happen in the next life. For those examples that don't seem to work out as they should in this world, for the most part in this world, what goes around does come around. At the very least in this world, God is at least providing real opportunities for growth and maturity and our horizons to be expanded. After all, Paul says, if God is for us, who is against us? Nothing can separate us from the love of God. God is always there with us. God is always working with us. God is down behind the scenes and underneath it all and pulling the good out of everything that happens that we do in our lives and our relationships, for better or for worse. God is always underneath pulling good out of that. So let us give what we hope to get out of this life. Let us be straightforward and truthful. Let us be good to the people around us. Let us be considerate of their feelings. Let us go and do for people in need. Let us love unconditionally. And let our faith in and commitment to the Lord be unwavering. Amen.